Hey there, welcome to ITV. I'm Ambika Kulburgi. Renowned Indian violinist and composer L. Subramaniam was in Washington this past weekend to perform at the Maximum India Festival. Just hours before he enthralled the audience at the Kennedy Center, we spoke to the legendary musician. As an artist, he explained the importance of performing at a festival like Maximum India.
The Maximum India Festival gives a great opportunity for people who have not heard or have not had the opportunity to come and really feel our culture or hear our culture or see our cultural things. Here, by presenting those things, not only the artist get to perform here to give the perspective of our own culture, but also the audiences who are local audiences and foreigners who belongs to this country, and also our own people who have migrated over a period of year who have not had the opportunity to listen to these kind of things, get a great opportunity to listen to that. It spreads the culture, spreads the message, spread the understanding between the two countries. It's very, very important to do those things.
Dr. Subramaniam said India and its art and culture are better appreciated in the United States now.
But early years, the awareness of Indian music was basically in relation to, say, George Harrison or Beatles. He introduced sitar, so everybody got an exposure to Indian music, and they also got exposure to yoga, meditation, and all these things which Beatles were getting involved in because they were such a very powerful cult figures and most successful group at that time. So people, whatever they did was an in thing. The whole hippie movement, everything was connected with each other. But subsequently, the interest have become deeper and changed because people who want to know about Indian culture or Indian music or India as such, many of them have started coming regularly to India, started studying about Indian culture, Indian music, Indian dance, and also many of them have started learning. And then they come back and they try to write books or talk to people, and there are different universities have opened up Indian chairs. So it has become a much more serious affair. And many, many great composers and artists in the West have started seriously collaborating so that they use a lot of our own rhythmic structure or melodic structure or our theme, and have created major compositions.
Dr. Subramaniam has collaborated with some of the greatest artists of the past half century. He spoke about his experience in collaborative works.
Yeah, I've had great pleasure in working with some of the greatest artists. I played with Lord Ehudi Menuhin quite a few times, and we performed together in the United Nations for the 40th year of India's independence. I've collaborated with Stephen Grappelli, the greatest jazz violinist of that time, and we did albums called Conversations, and we did a major tour in India. And in fact, when I started this year being my father's birth centenary year, when we started Lakshminarayana Global Music Festival in 1992, both Menuhin and Grappelli were the honorary patrons, both the violinists. And both of them have come to India also and performed, and we have done a lot of collaborative work. And also here, like some of the greatest jazz artists like Herbie Hancock, George Duke, Stanley Clarke, Al Giro, and Corky Siegel, many great artists, Larry Coryell, I've had the opportunity to collaborate and write compositions and record with them over a period of time. And recently when Mr. Paxton, BET Jazz, wanted them to perform in my festival for their television show, some of the great artists from here collaborated, performed in Delhi. It was shot there and they showed it here in BET Jazz. So a lot of collaborative work have happened. And the latest one, what I have done is we had the violinists from different parts of the world. Paying tribute to my father, we did a 6-city tour in India where we had a violinist from Algeria. They play the violin upside down. And the country fiddle, Mark O'Connor from here, New York. And then we had the brilliant Norwegian folk fiddler playing Hardinger fiddle. So like that, we have different styles of violins we presented. Always had great happiness doing these things because my interest was when I came here to do my master's in Western classical music. My focus was composition and Western music. So using that knowledge, I've had an opportunity to write for New York Philharmonic when Maestro Mehta asked me to write a composition for India Festival in '85. We did 4 nights concerts, fantasy on Vedic chant. Subsequently, when both the presidents, Indian and USSR president, were there in Moscow, we did a big show with the Moscow Symphony, Chinese Beijing Symphony. So we have collaborative work has happened in different ways, either as in a chamber context with jazz artists or classical artists like Menuhin or Ruggiero Ricci, people like that. Then in a major way with the symphony orchestras like New York Philharmonic, London Philharmonic, and Swiss Romand and major orchestras.
Dr. Subramaniam stressed the importance of learning the tradition of other artists before engaging in collaborative works.
Whenever you do any collaboration, for the success of the collaboration is very, very important. You study the other system also. Because otherwise, if two people, however great they are, they just play together, it'll be like a jam session. They just get together, play, they finalize the ending and beginning. But when you really want to do a collaborative work, if you study their music, whatever way you have to, then write composition, knowing their forte and try to push their boundaries and push your boundary and create a new direction. That becomes much more intellectually challenging and rewarding. So it is very important. Otherwise, it's very easy for two people to get together. You improvise, I improvise, we finish together.
Dr. Subramaniam explained the big role his late father, V. Lakshmi Narayana, played in the transformation of Indian violin.
Initially, the violin is probably the most played instrument in the world and most popular instrument. If you see any city in Europe or US, every city has an orchestra, sometimes more than one orchestra, two orchestras sometimes, many more than that. So in an orchestra, majority of the instruments are violinists. So violin being a Western instrument, technically there are compositions, very advanced composition which have been written by some of the European composers in the past like Paganini, Sarasate, Ase, and different people have written technically very complex things. So they have pushed their boundary really because of some of the composers who were violinists themselves. But in the Indian music, the whole contrast started as an accompanying instrument. But in the West, whenever anybody learns a violin, their dream is to become a soloist. So where they play alone or play as a soloist with an orchestra, so you become the main focus of the concert. But if that doesn't work out, sometimes they form a chamber group, like a string quartet, quintet, or trio, or things. Then subsequently, otherwise they have some chamber orchestras, they become a part of the orchestra, or part of a major orchestra, symphony orchestra, philharmonic orchestra, and slowly try to push up to getting to the concert master level. But in Indian music, when it was introduced, one of the earliest exponent was Balaswami Dikshita, Muthuswami Dikshita's disciple. And they introduced the violin as an accompanying instrument for the main artist, for vocal or any other instrument. And it slowly became the most important accompanying instrument because it was a fretless and bowed instrument. Also, if you see, there is no concert literally in South India without a violin now, because violin is the most important accompanying instrument. But my father was responsible for shifting the paradigm of whole thought. He wanted to make the violin as a solo instrument. 1935 or so, when he started playing, he said we should make this violin also as a primary solo instrument so that it could be on par with Western instruments, like any other Western instrument, particularly Western violin. So we should be able to play in a mainstream audiences in the West. So in order to achieve that, we had to develop a lot of new technique because our technique was accompanying technique, not a solo technique. There were no repertoire written for the violin to improve the technique. So he pushed the boundaries, expanded the range, introduced using a lot of the little finger techniques, which was not there at all at the time, and a lot of bowing techniques. Then subsequently, in his path, he formed a violin trio with three of us, three of his sons. And subsequently, I developed a lot of techniques using some of the Veena technique, which is one of the most important traditional Indian instrument for us. So the violin took a position of solo position, and we became just soloists, left alone, leaving alone accompaniment. But that period, it was very difficult. Everybody had to accompany. Once in a blue moon, they played solo. They were not able to say, okay, I'm going to play only solo, I'm not going to accompany, because that violin was not developed to that extent at that time. But it has changed now. Now we are so happy to see, a lot of the future generation, next generation, after my generation, a lot of people have been courageous enough to follow us and start playing violin solos. A lot of people are using modified violin, like we started 5-string instrument, we started multiple variation of a regular violin, sympathetic strings like that. Everybody is using a contact microphone. The whole generation has shifted from thinking of, oh, I want to be an accompanist, play with the famous artists like Chembai Vaidyanatha Bhagavatar or people like that. At that generation, I want to be a soloist. That shift, my father was responsible. In fact, in that connection, we are having a big celebration of my father's birth centenary. He was born in India. He's a brilliant visionary, so he created a lot of technique. So Lakshmi Narayana Global Music Festival we are doing all over the world, and I've been very fortunate. A lot of the great violinists from all over the world, they are all coming to pay tribute to him, play in India.